John really stole my question, but I'll try to come up with something equally entertaining. My question would be, what leaders do you think in our, either in Congress or elsewhere, that really reflect independent way of thinking? Can you give us some idea who those might be?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think Evan Bayh, who announced he was not running for re-election, you read his goodbye statement, and it is really expressing what many independents are feeling in the center, and many folks in the center of both parties. It's important to remember that, you know, the center of both parties actually, centrist Democrats and Republicans actually have more in common right now than they do with the far left or far right of their own party in many cases. And they feel that they're getting grief all day. There's nobody standing up and supporting them for trying to reach across the aisle. They're only getting attacked by the opposition and by their own base increasingly loudly. You know, the right's had the Club for Growth for a while. Now Democratic versions of that are popping up and running ads against vulnerable, you know, congressmen and senators for not towing the party line. So, you know, this Evan Bayh's statement, I think, really crystallized it, and he has. I think that, you know, John McCain, up until this year, has been, you know, up until the end of his own campaign, has been a hero to many independents. I think, looking back at the way Bill Clinton governed in his professional life, I think many people see that he fought the fight for a third way. In the during the 1990s, there was a generation of independent governors running. And, you know, Jesse Ventura, Lowell Weicker, and Angus King being the least well-known but the most effective of them, two-term governor of Maine. But he expressed it pretty well. He said, you know, I'm too fiscally conservative for the Democrats, too socially liberal for the Republicans, like 70% of the American people. Yeah. But I think it's up for more people. We're at a point where it's time for a new generation to rise up. And the good news is, I think, overwhelmingly, the new rising generation of Americans has that perspective. You look at like Cory Booker in Newark, or Harold Ford, formerly of Tennessee. You know, I think express that perspective well, but still the party apparatus is controlled by the extremes. So that's a fight. The good thing is it's a good fight. I look forward to that fight. Yes, sir.
Ever since the Bork confirmation hearings, judicial confirmation hearings have tended to bring out the wingnuts on both the left and the right.
Yeah.
Do you, especially those for the Supreme Court, lifetime appointments, et cetera, do you have any cure for that?
Well, I think you make the great point. I mean, beginning with Bork, it's a perfect example of sort of the politics of personal destruction and demonizing people who disagree with you. I mean, the right standard is this person qualified to be a Supreme Court judge? Most of them are. You know, there's a famous case where Nixon sent up an appointment who didn't appear to be too qualified, and I think one of the senators, I think from Nebraska, said that you know, he may be a mediocre intellect, but mediocre people need representation on the Supreme Court as well. Oh, good. Well, I'm always glad to come to someone's hometown and trash him. I apologize. I'm an equal opportunity offender. But you know, so that's the only litmus test I'd have. I mean, I think, you know, the judicial wars, I mean, they have really troubling roots too. If you look at, you know, the way that the Warren Court was demonized over really Brown v. Board. You know, I mean, I think in fairness, it began there, not just Judge Bork. But that is a sign of the sickness in our politics. And again, the only way it's going to stop is if decent people in the opposing party don't just tee up and defer to the people who want to declare war on every appointment. There is such a thing as a constructive appointment. I know right before Judge Sotomayor was nominated, I called up a bunch of conservatives, including a former attorney general, and I said, who would be an acceptable candidate from your perspective? Who a Democrat could actually appoint? You know, don't just tell me that, you know, the Democrat should appoint a Republican. And to a person, I kept hearing, well, I can't tell you that. They said, why? Well, it would hurt their chances. I mean, that's a sign of the sickness going on.
All right. First, a comment. There's no way that the Republicans or the Democrats are ever going to give up partisan control of reapportionment. We have an issue on the ballot in Florida. It may be good, it may be bad. I haven't studied it enough to know. But, you know, the Republicans are fighting it like hell, and there's even some Democrats have problems with it. That's my comment. The question is, we're a closed primary state. You know, the 5.1% gives us our candidates. and we have a choice between a Republican hack and a Democratic hack. Sorry, Michelle.
With some notable exceptions.
One exception, right?
Present
here.
company accepted. Yeah.
Okay. The question is, what do you foresee happening? How can the independents become more of a factor and not just rubber stamping whatever, the parties give them? How do they assert themselves and take control?
Well, 2 points. I mean, as someone once famously said, decisions are made by people who show up. And part of the problem is that the center hasn't been showing up enough. We haven't been standing up and getting involved enough. And it's in part, people in the center tend not to be obsessed with politics. They have lives. And that's a good thing. It doesn't make them less valuable citizens. But they do need to get more involved. I mean, the one thing I'm not as despondent about redistricting reform as you may be, because, in fact, it's on the ballot in a number of states and it's been passing. Governor Schwarzenegger took a lot of flack for trying to put it on the ballot in, I think it was 2005, and he got killed. He got demonized by the unions, and surprisingly, not surprisingly, attacked by Republicans as well. Why? Because, and here every state can feel good in comparison to California state politics, except possibly New York, my home state. But it's the one thing, by God, it was the one thing that Democrats and Republicans could agree with in Sacramento, was that redistricting reform was not in their interest, which of course meant that it really should have been the first thing that they took on. And the good news, the happy ending here, is that it was actually put on the ballot during 2008 in a presidential election with high turnout, and it passed. So California is going to get redistricting reform. A lot of states are moving towards that. So I'm not despairing, but the answer is, I mean, you can't rely on the people with the self-interest in rigging the system to change it. So in this case, ballot for ballot referendums are one way to get it done. But look, at the end of the day, we're democracy, folks, and if we show up and send a message, I believe even the political consultants and politicians in the room will appreciate that you probably go where the numbers are at the end of the day. If we start making it real clear. The other thing I think we can do and should do, and I started doing this in the last cycle, it's time to stop thinking about politics in right versus left and start thinking about it in terms of right versus wrong. And really start looking at candidates that you can support across the aisle. I did a column the other year, 5 centrist Democrats and 5 centrist Republicans who deserve your support. Don't think in parliamentary lines. Look at the person. Look at the policies. And if you gave money or supported or worked for or volunteered for candidates on both sides of the aisle simply because you thought they were decent, reasonable, responsible people, that'll send a message too. I mean, I can't tell you, if there was a bipartisan pack in this country, it would blow Washington's mind. People will have sparks coming out of their ears because they wouldn't understand it. But of course, all that would be doing is reflecting what most Americans try to do, which is vote the person, not the party. So that'd be the second way.